Hi, everybody. Welcome to my channel. I'm Johanna here, your host for the Prophet of EDAN discussion by Philip Chase.
Whatever, guys.
And
Whatever. I forgot it downstairs.
Me too. That's what I sent Corey for.
We could just fix that in editing. Anyhow, very happy here to have, three wonderful guests. So we have, look, the whole EDAN trilogy is there.
They do look so good in person. I will say that, Philip. Like, I don't think digitally online it does it justice, but in person, they look very nice as a set. Like, very, very nice.
I just want to have windows put in my house now. You know, stained glass windows.
Oh, perfect.
Oh, yeah. That's what Sanderson does. You do it too.
That would be nice.
I just have to sell as many books as Sanderson.
Then you can do like the EDAN suite because he has like the Elantris suite.
Yeah.
I want to get invited there so bad just to wet the bed in the Elantris suite. I think it'd be so funny.
What's wrong with you? It's a legit question. I meant it.
Philip, you could start some secret project books. Yeah.
I could. Yeah.
Kickstarter. All right. So here with me today, I have the author, Philip Chase. So hello, Philip. Thank you so much for joining us on the discussion about your book.
Thank you, Johanna, for hosting this. I am very excited, a little nervous to be talking to the three of you about this book, but mostly excited. So thank you so much.
Happy to celebrate you and your book. And it's so exciting that you now have the trilogy completed. And so all three books are available for anyone. And maybe I'll go ahead and post links in the description in case anybody wants to go check out that series on Amazon. And we also have joining us Jimmy Nuts and Merphy Napier. So hello, you two. I'm just going to say hi to you at the same time. Hi, guys.
Hi.
What up?
We're going to go ahead and start spoiler free. And this particular book, I guess we'll have to have some spoilers for book one. I'm not sure.
I think we can manage.
Yeah. We're professionals.
Yeah, we got it.
So non-spoiler thoughts about book one. I guess one thing I could say that is definitely kind of spoiled on the back cover are the dragons.
Ooh.
There are, in fact, dragons.
The vomiting dragons.
The vomiting, yes. The dragons vomiting fire. I noticed that. Or disgorging fire. Yes. So anyhow, non-spoiler thoughts. Anybody want to kick us off?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
So in book one, Dayraven ends up with, and we can say it, right? Because it's at the very beginning, eh? What the inciting? Yeah. Cool. All right. With an elf shard. So it changes his life, gives him a lot of inconveniences. And in book two, we watch him reckon with that a lot and have to work through his own identity and his own purpose and how much, really, I think a theme in this book, and not just Dayraven, but Sequara and many side characters, a theme that keeps reoccurring is how much of myself and my own dreams and my own identity do I sacrifice for the greater good and for other people? And I think for me, watching Dayraven's journey as a character, watching his internal struggles, watching each character figure out what that means for them was probably my favorite part about this book, is seeing that kind of internal reflection and growth and how it manifested in so many different ways.
Beautiful theme. Yeah, I definitely see that being the case for sure. In both characters, prominently, Dayraven and Sequara as well. By the way, we were just talking right before this discussion about whether Philip is a character-driven reader. And Philip, you said that you're actually more of a theme-driven reader. But of course, this can be accomplished through the characters. And so speaking to that theme, was that something you were consciously doing throughout the trilogy, was trying to bring out the theme of identity?
Oh, most definitely. Yes. I would say that is something that I was consciously trying to explore from the very beginning, from the conception of the trilogy. And I've said this a few times, but just the broad idea of the first book being the departure and the second book being transcendence and the third book being the return, a kind of hero's journey type thing. And I think that can be mapped onto both Dayraven and Sequara because both have to leave behind the familiar, and in book two particularly have to make major decisions, as Merphy said so well. I think these are decisions that hinge on how much of myself can I hold on to, or do I need to let go of these aspects of myself in order to accomplish this greater goal, in order to do good for other people? And they both have to confront this. Like Sequara, I don't think it's a spoiler to say she sees herself as a healer, and she's put in situations where to defend her home, she is essentially forced to commit violence. And that is something that she continuously wrestles with. In Dayraven's case, he is confronted with the need to perhaps even transcend his own identity and leave behind everything that made him who he was, in order to accomplish a greater goal, for the greater good. So most definitely something I was consciously trying to explore. So I'm glad that you picked up on that, Merphy.
Yeah,
Yes.
Philip, I think a lot of it too is it's not just, I think if it were just Dayraven trying to figure out, okay, how much myself do I need to give up and how will that affect the people that love me and, you know, like all that kind of turmoil, I think that would be interesting in and of itself. But it was also, it was a lot of different layers of that. It was how much of my dreams do I have to give up? How much of my personal aspirations, my personal ties to this world, my personal desires. And it wasn't just Dayraven, but it was many characters that had to face that very question. I know, Jimmy, there's in the spoiler section, there's a scene that really affected you that ties into that as well, that you enjoyed. I won't like overspeak for you, but there's a scene that you enjoyed that ties into all that as well. That's very just focused on personal sacrifice for those you love and how much is required of you.
Right. I also want to say too that in relation to that theme, and I think I could say this spoiler free as well, is I appreciated how much that was woven into the magic in this story.
Mm,
Because I feel like we do see a lot of fantasy stories that explore identity and coming of age, but those aspects aren't necessarily embedded in the magic the way that it is in the EDAN trilogy. So I do appreciate that quite a bit.
mhm.
Yeah. Jimmy, was there any theme that you noticed that spoke to you in the trilogy or that you want to talk about spoiler free?
I mean, there's always the one that always works for me, which is like the cost of being a warrior. Like, there's one thing to be really good at killing stuff, but like, what's that really mean? And just because you're good at something doesn't mean you necessarily enjoy it, right? Like, I'm really good at numbers. I was very good in accounting. But thankfully, before I finished my degree, I was like, oh, I hate this. Just because I'm good at it doesn't mean I should be doing this. And just having to live with that is a very difficult thing. So I think that that's explored rather well. And then, we talked about the interpersonal struggle of like what you are and like the greater good of everyone else. But there's also just a world at odds with itself. Like there are people who have ideas of the way the world should be, and they are going to enforce that by any means necessary, which I think is fairly true for humans. Like humans aren't good with power. We never have been, and we never will be. It just doesn't work, no matter who it is. I don't think so. That is something that's explored definitely in vivid detail in book 2 that I enjoyed. And also just like how the decision of people at the top and just a room full of people can devastate, countries and thousands of people and affect their lives, not just for the moment, but, post those moments and, probably for the rest of their lineage. It'll be passed down in generations. So I think all of that is stuff that anyone that likes like epic fantasy can kind of get behind. That's stuff I always really enjoy, is, the decisions of an elite few trickling down and destroying the lives of the common folk, as has been the case in history. I think of Malazan quite a bit and thinking about the Marines who are impacted by decisions from the top that they might not have signed up for, stuff like that. So that's what I took from book 2 and probably what I like the most about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that one thing to say too about book 2 is we just see the world get explored quite a bit more. We get quite a few more settings. We get introduced to different tribes. So it was interesting to see how they're engaged in this conflict, whether because they want to or not, kind of like what you were saying, Jimmy. And yeah, I thought that was a really interesting choice for this transcendence that you're trying to build in this particular book.
Hmm.
Anything you want to respond to, Philip? Or sorry, Merphy, were you going to say something?
No, Philip, go ahead.
Oh, well, Jimmy did make me think of something near the end of his comments there, in regard to what was the last thing you were talking about, Jimmy? It was now I've lost my
It
thought.
was really a word salad at the end of the day. So
Good word salad.
no, I was just talking about how, you know, a room full of elites can affect people in
Yes.
their day-to-day lives.
Yes. Yeah. So another, just kind of going along with that, the idea that we mentioned there are dragons in this,
Yeah.
the idea that this affects not just other people, but other creatures as well. And the fact that one thing you could see in the first book, I think, was an attempt on my part, at least, to build some understanding for the creatures that are being used, that are being exploited, because human beings do have a tendency as well to look at the world as basically being there for them to exploit. And we have destroyed a lot of other life forms with that attitude. So something that along the lines of people at the top making decisions that affect all kinds of other people with seemingly little remorse or little thought as to those consequences, that it goes beyond people as well, I think. Little bit of exploration of that, because that idea of transcendence includes not just people, but also, identifying with all of life, so.
Well, I had a shower thought right before I got on to record this. And my shower thought was, man, that sushi was delicious. And I was like, I can't wait to tell everyone about it. But then I was like, oh yeah, there's 2 vegans who are not going to want to hear about me eating fish. And then I literally thought, I go, I'm kind of surprised Philip didn't slam some vegan propaganda into his books. And then it turns out it's actually there, which is
I'm actually vegetarian, not vegan.
No, sorry.
There's a difference.
My bad.
Yeah.
No bacon. That's all I hear. That's all I have.
Oh, goodness. No, Philip likes to throw the bacon, remember?
Oh,
Likes
yeah.
to steal it
Right
from
off the
people,
plate. Don't eat it in
throw
front of
it at
him.
people.
Having none of it. But I was wondering if there was any vegan propaganda or vegetarian propaganda, and it turns out there was. How did you get the dude from Duck Dynasty to talk about your book? Like, is no one else going to talk about this? Like, we're just all going to act like that's normal? Philip literally had a dude from Duck Dynasty on his channel talking about his book. What happened there? Are you paying influencers now? Like, what is this?
What's that? What's Duck Dynasty?
Duck Dynasty was like the biggest reality TV show for like a couple of years. It's essentially just like a bunch of like, I can say it because I came from hillbillies doing their thing and being good old boys. And Philip had one of them on his channel talking about his friggin' book. You want to explain yourself?
I mean, I can if you want.
I would love it.
So John Luke Robertson, who I did not know actually at first anything about the whole TV show, which I have never watched, but I did find out later. But he was someone who just started to review the books on GOODREADS, and I thought, wow, what a nice person! What a really nice thing to do. That he would leave these reviews. So eventually I did figure out the whole connection, which I still probably am not properly aware of how big that is, because I haven't, like Johanna, I was like, what's Duck Dynasty?
I haven't had cable in 15 years and I know about it. That's how big it is.
Okay. But he's a very, very, I mean, he's a fan of fantasy. And he is a reader and probably going to be a writer, I suspect. But just a really nice young fella who was reading my books. And I thought, I'm having conversations with people who reviewed the books. I'll ask him. And he graciously agreed. So, yeah, that's basically the story. Very, very nice person.
He was very nice. He was very well spoken.
Yeah.
And if he watched this, I say hillbilly with like endearment on my entire family. I mean it in a nice way. But yeah, that was a mine. I was like, what kind of era are we going into for Philip here? This is wild.
So anyway, I think Merphy does have some. You know John Luke somehow or other, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Okay. There's a Duck Dynasty conspiracy now.
Yeah.
Duck
Mind
Dynasty is infiltrating YouTube. Dude, I'm telling you, watch. Duck Dynasty new season, YouTube TV. It's a thing. Watch. Just watch. It's going to happen for sure. Merphy, how do you know the Duck Dynasty guys?
He was doing a project and he reached out to me and we talked a little bit about it.
What's he doing? Teaching ducks to read?
He had this big Sanderson plan. He was going to do like a thing.
Wow.
All right.
He's a big Sanderson fan.
Okay,
So
okay.
he reached out to a couple of Sanderson people.
You just sounded so secretive.
Well, I mean, like, what do you want me to do? Divulge all of his secrets?
Yes. Yes. Would you just sign an
Anyway.
NDA?
No.
Oh my God, you did.
No.
You signed an NDA.
Anyway, so Philip's book.
Oh my.
Back to thank you. Ray.
We're surrounded. We're surrounded
Um,
by.
So Philip,
Yes.
speaking of dragons and your desire to show compassion for the way humans sometimes treat animals, that is a huge factor in this book as well. We're dealing with a holy war. There's some enslaved dragons, and there's a lot of dragon fighting action. These dragons are beasts. My goodness, like, they will level a town. This is a really action-packed book, extremely action-packed book. We had some action in the first book, but book 2 is like we are in the thick of a war, and a lot of battle sequences. What was your training or your inspiration for doing so much battle? Because I actually think, as someone who really doesn't care that much about very many battle scenes, I think you did a great job with the action of the books.
Thank you. Yeah, I have heard people who read the first book and then this one say, and this one is 219,000 words. The first book is only 165,000 words, and a lot of people are saying that the second book it's bigger, but it reads faster than the first book, and that's some people anyway have said that, and a lot of that is because of the action. And I hope that came across with the cover and everything, that this is a much more action oriented book. And with the prologue, it just starts out boom, with that basically a prologue is your chance to tell a reader, here's what to expect. And so I kind of went for it there, I think, in the prologue. But as far as my own experience and how that played a role, I guess it's probably twofold at least. One part is I'm a medievalist, so I'm definitely drawing from my knowledge of medieval literature and history and that sort of thing. And many points in the Middle Ages, there was a lot of violence. There was a lot of pretty awful stuff that people were doing to each other. There were all these big old wars that were happening. It's just, George R.R. Martin, Jimmy, famously is inspired by the Wars of the Roses as a good example. Yep. So there's the medieval part of it, and then just fantasy, I guess. I try to do some things kind of like Abercrombie does in a battle, where he'll do all the whole shifting,
switching,
head hopping as they call it, in the midst of a battle, to try to give a sense of the pandemonium and the raise the stakes, raise the tension, that sort of thing. So I try to learn from authors like Steven Erikson, who I think probably is the best describer of battles I've ever come across. And it's funny because I don't think he or Joe Abercrombie have ever been in a battle. I certainly have not. So I guess some of that, as an author, you just have to rely on the experiences of people who have been through things, who describe them. So there are certainly other authors who have been, like, Glenn Cook, for example, the author of The Black Company, is a Vietnam War veteran. So, you try to look at the people who do it well, and you think, okay, what can I learn from that? And that's, I guess, how I went about it. I wanted it to be graphic and not idealized. I wanted it to be painful. I wanted it to be visceral, because I did not want this to be, and I have no problem with authors. One of my favorite authors is Tolkien, and he actually did go through a war, and he described battles in a way that is very stylized, very sterilized, and idealized. But I did not want to go that route. I decided early on that I was going to try to be, I don't know if honest is the right word, because I've never witnessed anything like that, but the way I imagine it to be. based on what I've heard. So I tried. It was important to me to make it as real, I guess that's probably the wrong word, but as I could.
Fantastic. It's great to hear your thoughts on that. And it is curious to me because there are quite a few battle scenes in this book. And yet the main theme of this book, as you said, is transcendence. So
Hmm.
can you explain the connection between those two things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess this is the question. How is it that human beings are capable of such beautiful acts of love, that we are capable of wonder and imagination and transcendence, and at the same time we are capable of committing horrible atrocities, and we are capable of otherizing, and we are capable of hate? And that is, I think, something that I am exploring in this trilogy. Again, I'm trying not to do spoilers yet. I think we're not quite ready for spoilers, but one of the questions that I have is humanity redeemable? And from the perspective, imagine that
Jimmy shook his head.
we're not redeemable. I know
It's a
Jimmy's
straight
answer.
no.
I know Jimmy's answer.
No.
Are we redeemable?
Wow.
From the perspective of this ethereal, otherworldly, timeless being, the elf, we are a disease. We are cancer on this world. We are essentially the most destructive creature ever. We have caused more suffering than any other creature. We cause suffering amongst ourselves and to other creatures. So the question is, are we redeemable? Are we capable of good that transcends that harm, that suffering? So that's the question I'm trying to explore. And that really ratchets up in the third book in a big way, which I think is going to be, I'm predicting right now, Jimmy's favorite, the third book, I think. So
might be a pessimistic ending. I mean, I could get behind that. Great.
So, but this book, I hope Alan is going to have a blast narrating this one, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
there's
really
some dirty
love your
words in there, Philip. I was a little worried.
Oh, that's true.
I feel like you amped up your violence and your swearing in this book.
Well, there are certain characters who swear. I think Alan's okay with the potty words, as long as there aren't any like seriously rated R like naughty times scenes. Alan is okay. I think otherwise.
I was surprised by some of the description. I honestly was when I read some of it. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was trying I guess you have to decide, how do you want to portray violence? And I really wanted to see how, explore this side of humanity, which, has perpetrated these things. I mean, nothing that I describe is as bad as what human beings have actually done to each other in our history. There are things that we've done to each other that are probably worse. So, I think your buddy George R. Martin has a quote relevant to that, right? Where human history is where you can find the worst atrocities. Never mind, yeah.
Yeah. Ken Liu has talked about the same thing. He doesn't put anything in his book that isn't written in history. And people come to him and they're like, how could you write that? And he's like, it's there.
We've done it. Yeah. I mean, we don't have dragons, but frankly, the humans are worse than the dragons in my books.
And there are other characters that get exploited in this as well, like other kinds of creatures. There are pukas and eots. Am I saying that right?
Oh, so the Aglax and the pukas and the trolls.
Okay.
And Theos are Orvindil's people.
Oh, oops. Sorry. Yeah.
So you did better than I would have done.
Terrible memory for the creatures, but for the names. But I do remember them. I do remember visually what they were like, and I almost felt kind of sorry for them too, honestly.
Yeah, I hope you did, because they didn't want to be there.
Yeah,
they did not.
They were seen as tools. They were specifically called tools. Yeah.
Yep.
But I did appreciate the way you answered that question, though, Philip, about transcendence. and using the battle scenes to show how far do we go before we have crossed that point where we're not redeemable. And of course, through the battle scenes and through the war that you have going on, you do illustrate those other themes that I think Jimmy was talking about earlier, such as like the zealotry, the othering, the abuse of power, of course, or the other one I know that you've talked about before is the issue that, and it's one that I think our character Sequara deals with quite a bit, is that like the issue that where people are so concerned with self-preservation that they wait until the problem comes to their doorstep before they're willing to do something about it.
Yeah.
And her challenge is trying to awaken people to see beyond their doorstep, in other words.
Yep.
Yeah. Is there anything else anybody wants to talk about spoiler free before we move into the spoilers? Oh,
I don't think so.
all right. Yeah. So this is kind of not super spoilery, but I did notice that in this book, in The Prophet of EDAN, we also tackle the issue of slavery. Slavery is approached as, well, it's an interesting, has an interesting history in this world, right? And I'm just pulling some notes that I wrote because it's been a while now since I read the book. But the Ilacre or Ilarque, I'm sorry, I'm going to mispronounce everything.
No, you're doing fine. Never apologize for pronunciations.
The clans people?
Yeah, the people of the folk of the tribes, you could call them. That's what they like to call themselves.
The folk of the tribes. There are various tribes too. There's more than one, but just in general, they're lumped. The way everyone else looks at them is just kind of one people.
That's right. That's right. And so that's an interesting difference in perception. That people outside of their culture call them Ilarchai, and people within their own culture, they prefer to think of themselves as very separate entities, as different tribes. They don't see themselves as all being the same. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's one region in the world, the Sildarin. Am I saying that word right? The Sildarin kingdom, they grew to depend on the slaves. They profited from them. Yeah. And Sandara refused to buy the slaves. That's what I wrote down. And then Astrolad, where Sequara is from, the island, they are the only kingdom that refused to buy slaves. So you see like 3 different kinds of relationships with slaves. And then I wrote down here, and I don't think I wrote this right, but was it the how do you say it? I'm so sorry.
Ilarchai, yeah.
Ilarchai, were they the ones who introduced the practice of slavery to the Andume? I wrote that down. That can't be right. Is it right?
That's correct. It's an irony.
I wrote that. Yeah, and I wrote down that's ironic, but now I don't really remember that. Can you explain that?
Sure. Yeah. So in my imagination, my back history of this whole world, I'll try to be brief. It was basically the Andumai had come to this continent a couple thousand years before, and they did not practice slavery. When the Ilarchai came, this was a culture that had what you might call it. I mean, it's just semantics, really, but you could call it thraldom. Let's call it thraldom. It's the same thing in some respects, but there are different kinds of slavery. It's all bad from our modern perspective, but in the culture that they brought with them, a person could become a slave for various reasons. Like they were from a conquered tribe, a rival tribe that was conquered. They become a slave. They could fall into some kind of debt. Various reasons why you could fall into thraldom, but it was not a permanent state. You could work your way out of it, in other words, and you were not seen as less human. You were not seen as something to be ostracized or looked down upon. It was just almost like a job. And so this culture came along with these concepts, and eventually, as these rival tribes were fighting against each other, they got the idea of their neighbors who looked down upon them, got the idea to copy that. So the people of Sildaran, and even the tribes themselves did not hesitate to sell slaves to this kingdom to the south. And so you have this slavery growing up inside Sildaran and eventually becoming hardened, in fact, in a way that slavery there was a much more permanent state. You were born into it. Although they also had their own internal, like their own people could be enslaved as well if they fell into debt or whatever, So they borrowed that concept essentially. And that's my imaginary. So, but as you said, Sundara and Astrolad refused to adopt this practice. They saw it as abhorrent. So, yeah.
Yeah. So my next question to that would be: were the different perspectives on slavery informed by the different religious perspectives in the world, or
Perhaps?
did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. They might have played a role, although in the case of the Andromaic kingdoms, you had one kingdom, Sildaran, that embraced slavery, and even eventually it evolved in a more extreme form within Sildaran, which is interesting, I hope, because it's the main kingdom that stands between against Torland. It's the other powerful kingdom in this continent. So you're kind of rooting for them because their Torlanders are the ones that are attacking them, but also they're not perfect either. This is not a perfect society that we're defending from the bad guys or anything like that. So,
I have a question.
Yeah.
In regards to the topic of slavery, the dragons too were enslaved by people. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the different regions treating slavery differently and viewing them differently, because I feel like we got a little bit of that in regards to the dragons as well.
Mhm.
We had the core issue, but then also near the end, the mother of dragons didn't really choose to fight alongside of us and was kind of forced. I mean, in a way, Dayraven enslaved her into that battle. He set her free afterwards, but it was a temporary enslavement.
Sure.
And I'm curious, is that something that you plan on exploring in book 3, or what? How I'd love some of your commentary on that, because I feel like it was kind of just mentioned and left, and I would have really loved to unpack that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I will be exploring consequences in book 3. That's what book 3 is about.
Yeah, I figured it was. It was a book of falling action, kind of Lord of the Rings-esque.
Kind of. I mean, it's interesting. I think it's interesting. I don't think typically in fantasy you would get this kind of book 3. A lot of fantasy stories would end where I end book 2.
Yes.
And in book 3, I feel like I'm maybe taking a risk by looking at the aftermath, by looking at the consequences. And there's plenty of action in there too. Plenty of that still. But this is where I'm really trying to explore these themes most thoroughly in the 3rd book. And consequences are a big part of that. The consequences for Dayraven are central to book 3, and particularly in regard to the use of the power, the elf shard that he used to, you're absolutely right, enslave Gorsarhad, the mother of dragons, to his will.
I wasn't going to try to say her name.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, book 3 is my favorite of the 3. It is, in some ways, the more philosophical. If you think Alan has problems with book 2, Jimmy, I mean, I think Return to EDAN could become his new punching bag to replace Toll the Hounds, maybe. I don't know.
Oh no. Oh, no. That's a serious punching bag.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't think I could come close to Toll the Hounds, but anyway, it's I do explore consequences. Yes.
Yeah. I think what you said kind of confirms that's what I was feeling. It's like the trouble with peace, phrase where it's, we're in a time of peace because the war's over, but that's not really the way it works, is it?
Right.
So I'm happy to hear that that's the direction that you end up going with it.
Yep.
Did anybody have anything else to add about the clans people, or we do meet a new character, I should say, but in regards to that part is Menziel. And I thought Menziel was a really interesting character, especially when he comes along and he has this interesting dream about the dragon. And right away, I did have the thought, and I'm terrible at predicting things, but I was like, I think he's misinterpreting his dream.
Well, I will say that misinterpretation of prophecy and dream and projecting our own needs or desires onto prophecies and dreams is definitely a theme that I
Oh
explore.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
great. I loved it.
with,
Yeah.
from Bledla to Munzil to, various characters. Even Dayraven, when he's told, oh yeah, you're the prophet of EDAN, he's like, I am? Oh, okay. Let's go with that. It's not meant, from at least my writing perspective, it was never meant to be this like numinous moment when suddenly the prophecy is revealed and there he is. And it's really more, in that particular moment, Galder saying, yeah, you're the prophet now. Okay. And Dayraven, okay.
Yeah. And him essentially saying, I don't believe that, but if that's what I have to be at this moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and so in this particular book, we do learn more about the magic. We learn more about the gift. We learn about Makti, the realm of origins, a bit more. And one thing that struck me at the beginning of the book was how Dayraven is having a conversation with Valdira, and Valdira tells him that we can help you come to terms with the gift. And then he says, I feel like he misconstrues what she says. And he says something like, you know, okay, I guess you can help me control this gift. I'm like, that's not what she said. She said, come to terms with it, not control it. And I think I liked that though. I felt that was intentional on your part, but just showing his resistance to seeing this as part of his life. He really wants to have this hopeful dream or hold on to this hopeful dream that he can one day be without it.
Yep. Yep. And his journey in here is a journey of accepting that the only way he's going to be able to use this is to give into it and to release those dreams. So yeah, that's what happens with Dayraven. Yeah.
Did Jimmy and Merphy, did you have anything you want to add about the magic stuff that we learned about?
Go for it.
I mean, the magic stuff's probably
Like the fourth most interesting thing.
I think it might be my favorite thing. Like the things I like about these books are you're very good at setting up your history. You're very good at setting out the world, and I always enjoy that. I enjoy seeing the new places, though I do have trouble deciphering the different clans people because I'm not a very imaginative person. And the magic is probably what I feel is like the most unique trait to this series, I would say, and the way that you end up going about it. So I enjoyed it here. I still don't know if I totally understand it, but I don't think I'm supposed to because Dayraven also does
definitely more on the soft side.
Yeah, definitely, and I'm cool with that. I like that. And I would say the best parts of this book second best parts of these books, maybe third, would probably the elf scenes, I would say.
Oh, those are my favorite by far. Those are definitely my favorite parts.
Speaking of magic, Dayraven is overpowered. And I have enjoyed having very powerful, very equipped people surrounding Dayraven as he has turned from farm boy to elven, immortal, powerful being. However, once he masters these powers, how are these people not going to fall by the wayside?
Well, yeah, especially since mastering these powers, which isn't really what's happening, it's more like surrendering to these powers, I guess.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's his fear. That's what he doesn't want to happen. That's why he has this dilemma. He has this conflict, which is, okay, they want me to use this in order to help win this war, to defend people from this aggression, this holy war started in the name of a religion. And the only way I can do that is to succumb to this thing in me. But if I do that, there's a very good chance, and he knows this, that this thing will essentially take over. I will no longer be me. And at the end of the book, we kind of sort of see that happening. So it's not like he's wrong. He knows that's going to happen. And so it's a really, in a way, he has that one attempt early on, like in the middle of the book, where the Torlenders invade Astrolad, which is was very hard for me to write that, because I like Azralat. I like the characters there. We lost some important characters in that moment. But Dayraven's failure, you could say, is due to his fear of losing himself in that moment. Later on, when he has his transcendent moment, his Buddha moment underneath the tree, like the Buddha underneath the banyan tree, only this is an oak, because I don't know, I wanted to do an oak. And it's also mixed with Norse mythology too, because you have a clear, allusion to Yggdrasil, the world tree, and all of that going on. So that's when he accepts, okay, I am probably not coming back from this, and I have to be okay with that. And it is a worthwhile sacrifice for me to make. And it nearly does happen that way, of course, at the Battle of Thulhan. What happens is, unfortunately, after defeating Bledla, Dayraven is taken over by the elf, and there's only one thing that brings him back, and one thing only. And if it hadn't happened that Sequara had healed Dayraven the way she had in the first book and shared his memories, I don't think she could have brought him back at the Battle of Thulhan in that moment when he was about to just basically suck the soul out of everybody, right? Because the elf had taken over, and the elf sees humans, it sees all the suffering they're causing, and it says, oh, well, there's an easy way to fix this. We'll just suck out all their souls and it'll be okay.
It's the AI reasoning, right? That's what people say about artificial intelligence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, it's hard to argue with that logic, although we have a sort of an invested interest against it. But
a little bit bias.
So it is Sequara, and she is the only person who could have brought him back. Because they love each other, and I hope that thread developed in a convincing manner. I know not everybody's there for the romance, but B, because she has his memories literally kicking around in here, and she's able to give them back to him and say, yes, you're Dayraven, you're not the elf. So that's a key moment there. Yeah.
So this is really interesting, because the one thing I was like going to get after you about, Philip, in a loving way, is that I got really upset for poor Sequara, because I felt like she faced failure so much throughout this book. Like, there were so many scenes where she's trying so hard and she keeps on failing, and she's worked her whole life with this gift, wielding this power, doing so much. Dayraven comes along and he powers up so quickly. He's just kind of, he has the elf shard. Obviously, the elf shard is responsible for this,
right?
But it broke my heart, this one scene where Sequara is just facing her failure, and she's realizing that she would never master the Song of Origins. But we know as readers that Dayraven will. And I was like, that's so unfair. She's worked so hard, and she earned it. But at the same time, I can see it too. I think there's some brilliance. There's some intelligence in that, because you also see that with that feeling of failure, or facing that failure, there's also that sense of attachment there too. And in order to wield the gift, you have to have a sense of equanimity. You can't let that attachment consume you. Right. You can't have too much desire. You talk a lot about that in this book too, about the dangers of desire and how that's interconnected to falling in love or having friendship. And so it's kind of interesting. Like it's kind of poetically structured together in a way that it is Dayraven, but at the same time it's Sequara. And yet Dayraven does have to sacrifice himself in order to do it. Yeah, it's an interesting problem.
Yeah, I think there's an argument that Sequara is actually the real hero of the trilogy.
I know, I've heard you say that. Yeah.
She saves Dayraven in the first book. She saves everybody in the second book, in the scene that I just talked about, because Dayraven would have killed everybody there if it hadn't been for Sequara getting there in time. And then one thing, I don't want to spoil the third book for you, but she has her own arc in the third book, which was very important to me. So her character for me is one of the most important and interesting. So I hope her arc will be satisfying to you in the third book.
I'd like to air a grievance.
Okay. Is this where I get in trouble? This is where I get in trouble, right?
I have a couple grievances, Philip.
Uh-oh.
First of all, this is the longest free soloing scene I have ever had to read. And you know how I feel about free soloing.
Oh, no.
In boots, Philip!
With
In
spikes?
boots, no less!
Spikes? I mean, it's like a medieval culture. I mean, they didn't have,
I yelled at Corey for 10 minutes after I read that scene.
Uh-oh.
Poor Corey.
This
Wait, did the fact that you would hurt your ankle have any bearing on this reaction?
Listen, I'm so mad about that, Philip, because Dayraven had a scene exactly like I had. There was a scene where he was reaching up to get a hold that he couldn't reach, and in his mind, he was like, okay, but if I jump for it, then I can catch it. And yeah, I won't be touching the wall for a second, but I'll get the hold. And you know what? He got the hold. And you know what else? You know what else, Philip? Let me tell you something.
You didn't? Are you saying you didn't get?
Don't even talk to me right now. There are specific
Oh my God.
exercises that people have to do to increase their grip strength in order to hold your whole body up by your fingertips. There are specific things that people have to do to train their fingertips to have. Dayraven was climbing this farmer boy. This podunk farmer boy.
Dehydrated too.
Climbing. Thank you, Jimmy.
Definitely
was
dehydrated.
Climbing for days, sleeping on the ledge, dehydrated, lack of food. And he's don't look at me like that. And he's holding himself up by his fingertips, swinging his legs like a pendulum to get to a foothold in boots and getting that foothold. Do you know that climbing shoes are some kind of torture to get your toes into the tiniest little space so you can catch that hold? And bro had boots on with no climbing experience, climbed a whole friggin' mountain and didn't die. Should have died 20 times. I'm just saying, I fell 10 feet and snapped my ankle. He should have fallen. I'm just saying.
He did have a little bird helping him.
He freaking did. Where's my bird?
Yeah, where's Merphy's bird?
He had the raven.
So that's my first grievance.
You needed a raven, Merphy. Yeah.
I needed a raven. Dadgummit.
Okay. So I feel like, Jenny Wirtz read the book and she lectured me about horses because she knows about horses. She knows everything about horses. She's an equestrian expert. And so I heard all the stuff I did wrong with horses.
Yeah. You should have had a meathead sensitivity reader, a climber chick sensitivity reader. We need some more readers in here so that you don't trigger us.
Yes, I do.
How dare you, Philip?
How dare you?
Okay, well, like Dayraven, we will survive that one, I think. So.
I will say about that scene, I didn't feel any tension in the climb because I knew you weren't going to let him fall and die in the climax of the book.
How are you so sure?
Philip, come on now. I mean, for me, I felt like I was like, we're still climbing this rock. And then we get to the next year. I'm like, he's still climbing the rock.
How would it have been, though, if I had him just like stumble on Gorsarhad's cave? Like, oh, there it is.
Well, of course, there has to be a journey there.
Yeah.
But I felt like I spent a lot of time climbing that rock with Dayraven. And I was just like, just climb the rock.
Merphy liked it.
That's right. That's right.
So wait,
I did like one particular line though in that scene. There was a line, and it's basically whatever the outcome of his struggle on this cliff might be, life would go on. There was that one line. I was like, I like that.
Yeah, that was
very
really
Robert
cool.
Frost of you, Philip.
Well, I am from New England, so
No, it makes sense now.
But I sent you a long text about it, Philip. I was like, I really love that line.
Yeah, that is a beautiful line.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something that I think about, and my own ponderings about my own place in the universe. life will go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just that understanding. And it's not even necessarily a nihilistic life will go on. It's more just
It's beautiful,
a
actually.
neutral
Yeah.
understanding. I don't know. And I guess it would be medieval, right? Would you say that's a medieval?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, because I think in those times they faced mortality. I mean, everyone faces it, I guess, but I think it was more pervasive in medieval times. There were more ways to die, and you would typically die younger.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But my main grievance is the elf turns ugly.
Uh-oh.
What is this? Like, hideous was her wrinkled visage, and her tongue as red as
Oh,
blood
the death
lolled
goddess.
between sharp
Yes. Yeah.
yellow teeth. What is this? That her face sagged so low that her red veined eyeballs protruded until they almost fell out and rolled around.
Yeah.
Pretty hideous.
Yeah. Well,
That scene was awesome.
yeah. The scene where Dayraven is swallowed by death.
Yeah, hideous. Her wrinkled visage, her tongue red and swollen. You already read that part. Let me find another good part. Maggots. There were squirming lumps of maggots that were people crawl beneath the pitted gray
Yeah.
flesh, hanging in loose folds of her enormous bones. Blech!
Sounds like my ex-wife. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
I don't have an ex-wife
I was gonna say.
yet.
Jimmy.
No, I'm just
Oh,
kidding.
Jimmy, you're going to get in trouble.
She's not gonna watch this. It's fine.
not.
Defend
Is that-
your descriptions, Philip.
Yeah.
Damn it. Get into the nuts and bolts.
Keep in mind that Philip has called me an elf for a long time, and this was before I knew how hideous elves were in the trilogy that
Oh
he wrote.
no.
I know.
Well, so it's just a matter of perception, right? Beauty's in the eye of the beholder.
No. No.
God.
No. There's nothing beautiful about maggots.
Mm-mm.
So, actually, what I'm trying to get across there is this sense, not of evil, because I would never call the elf evil. I would call it indifferent. It is indifferent. And from a little human perspective, that might seem evil because it doesn't care about me and I'm the most important thing, am I not? But no, actually, I'm not. And the elf's indifference, I think, is what people would perceive and find it very disturbing because we don't like to be reminded that we're actually just little specks of dust. And that's, yeah, I hope the elf doesn't come across as evil. But in that moment, he's seeing various faces. Like people have from time immemorial have tried to describe the numinous, the divine, in various ways, and there have been so many different sets of gods and that sort of thing. And you see, I think, in all of them, the various facets of what we feel to be the enormous power of the universe. And some of it is scary. But if you look up at the stars at night, and there's beauty there in those little twinkling lights, but there's also those vast dark spaces in between them. And so it's the sense of both beauty and threat. It's the sense of something that is much bigger than we are. And it feels like our own significance is brought to the fore when we witness that.
Yes. Yeah. I really loved the elf scenes, though. I mean, I really, really loved them. I think my favorite was the one with the tree.
Uh-huh.
And let's see. I just wrote cosmic, whole world. I don't know. I did a whole bunch of illustrations in my notes, but I thought that the tree part and the branches, it sounded very psychedelic,
Uh-huh.
but it did seem to bring out this feeling of transcendence and the numinous. And I think it's really neat that you did a series or did a story where there is a lot of action going on, as you said, like a lot of things happening in the world and people are concerned about the state of things. But then there's this whole surreal, otherworldly plane that we transcend into in the book. And I was just happy every time we were there. I was like, yes, I love this.
Yeah, I hope some of the worldly battle scenes too were convincing. There are moments in that Battle of Fuhan that I get emotional thinking about. I don't know how readers feel, but when Orvandil is forced to fight Dayraven's father, for example, or when Galdor loses Arna and responds to
Erd. I lost Erd.
and Ord. Yeah, I'm sorry. But there are all these these losses that accumulate in these moments too, and hopefully add to that sense of life's fleetingness, right? Putting us in our place, because we do lose, we are mortal creatures.
Yeah. It did feel to me like, I know where your influence is on you in this book, but there was something about that scene where Orvindil kills Dayraven's father with that sword that was Dayraven's father's sword.
Feel sword.
All of that, just something about all of that felt to me like it I don't know for sure because I'm not the most well read when it comes to the sagas, but it did feel like saga inspired or
you're
Old Norse
absolutely right.
inspired. I
You're
felt that so
absolutely right.
strongly.
Yeah, and the Old Norse sagas and Old English poetry, they reveled in putting people in these unwinnable situations where particularly if two loyalties are clashing with each other in one situation, and you have to choose, and no matter what you choose, you're going to lose. And Orvindil is put in that situation by just a terrible coincidence that he encounters Dayraven's father in the midst of the battle, who recognizes that sword and says, "Where is my son? What have you done with my son?"
Why didn't he let him answer? Like, he could have just let him answer.
Well, have you ever been in a terrible rage because someone you thought someone you love was being threatened or something like that?
I don't think.
Have you ever killed a man?
I've not killed a man. I've fought a man.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever.
But we don't tend to be good listeners when we're in the midst of an emotional frenzy. Yeah. Right. So yeah, he wasn't hearing anything. And poor Orvindil was trying to tell him, "I'm his friend," but how do you do that when you're trying to stay alive too, So
yeah. Orvindil's entire, I talk about non-spoiler fashion, but his struggle with being so good at being a warrior is probably my favorite thing in the book thematically. And the fact that he just repeatedly finds himself doing things that he doesn't really want to do, but he has to do them. And Dayraven kind of forgives him. Is like, "Yeah, you're just doing your job." And he's like, or something to that effect. And he's just like, "It's my job to kill people," or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
At Gil's funeral scene. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was probably the best moment of the book for me, other than whenever Erd and Faldira die, not because I wanted them to die, but because I was genuinely actually shocked when you did that. And I did like that battle quite a bit.
Yeah, creating the surge, that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, to get over the isthmus. That's something I stole from. In a way, I enhanced it considerably because there are stories in the sagas of Vikings who would actually carry their ships over narrow strips of land in order to escape or something like that. So that's kind of where that came from. But yeah.
So I think everyone's aired a grievance, so I get to do a grievance now, right?
Go for it.
Works? Okay.
Oh boy.
I just want to be clear. I was picking on you. Like,
all right. Well, I detested the Amar scene at the beginning of the book.
The dragon.
Like, Philip, I'm going to be dead honest with you. I put the book down for 2 weeks because I was like, I didn't like it. Like, it bothered me so much. And then when I finished the book today, it bothered me again because at the beginning of the book, we see a dragon and we see Amar jump in a dragon's mouth, essentially, and he's fine.
Well, he wasn't fine.
Well, but then the big end thing is that we have this dragon. It's supposed to be like, oh my God. But I'm like, it's a dragon. Who cares? I already saw someone jump out of a mouth. He's fine. Like that's how I felt. Like, it just didn't have that like monument moment for me. It was just like, all right. You know what I'm saying? And then I just felt like Amar, like, I don't know. I don't like Amar. So I'm biased, but I just feel like he was the beginning and he was there a little bit, kind of middle beginning, and then he's gone, which I'm sure he's in book 3. But I didn't like jumping in the dragon's mouth, man. But I do understand that you're going for maybe a bigger of a grander tale, epic kind of deal. But it just rubbed me the wrong way because you have these visceral battle scenes where like people are snarling and doing these things, and then you have something that I just felt was so, to use a pro wrestling term, it buried the dragon to me. Like, it's like, if me and Philip are wrestling in a main event or in the opening match of the night, and Philip hits me with his finishing move and I kick out at the count of 1, and then Philip hits it in the main event, no one's going to believe it's going to beat the guy because I already kicked out of it in match 1.
Huh.
So from that perspective, I just felt like it buried the dragons. And for Amar, who I didn't feel was very significant.
So
that's my grievance.
Okay. Well, I'll be interested to see what you think of him in the 3rd book. And
I'm probably still going to hate him.
And certain threads connected with him. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
My prediction is that the girl on the cover of the 3rd book is Amar's little sister. Am I way off?
Well, he doesn't have a little sister. He has a big sister.
Oh, I thought she was a little sister too. So
yeah.
Never mind. I have it all off.
He has a big sister. He talked about in the 1st book with Dayraven, and Dayraven had made this promise: after the war is over, we're going to find your sister. Because she was also sold into slavery, but Imhar has no idea where, because they were separated. They're the only 2 survivors from their family, though. So yeah, I mean, but she was older than him, so she would be a grown woman.
And it can't be her. Maybe her daughter. Who knows?
So yeah, you'll see who that is. Yeah, that's a scene that's well into the book. One of my favorite scenes, actually, to write. That was. So I will be curious, Jimmy. We'll come back to Imhar when you finish the 3rd book, perhaps.
All right. Well,
another grievance.
I will say that certain people told me they hated Dayraven in the 1st book, and they actually loved him by the end. So these things can happen.
He went from my second least favorite character to actually being interested in what he was doing for the most part. Though I didn't really like him in Sequara very much, but the thing that I was shocked by is that I just did not get behind Bledla in this book. Like, I had a lot of problems with Bledla. I actually felt at times he was laughable, like how evil he was. Like, I couldn't take him serious. Like, the monologues in his head, I was just like, and I think the reason why is because at the end of book 1, you gave us, he gave himself pause to doubt. And then at the beginning of book 2, he also doubts, and then he doubles down, which is a realistically that's probably what a zealot would do. However, just the whole faith in that side of things. Right. Like, I didn't feel like Euramon was able to balance him out. Galdor was really good in his whole arc and his romance. Like, all that was great. And then showing like a different perspective of like essentially bigotry that was forced upon him because of the title that he took and yada, yada, yada. But for me, yeah, Dayraven increased, and surprisingly Bledla, because I love hating somebody. Just, I don't know. It just, it did not go the way I expected it to go, for sure. But I just felt a little more interested in Dayraven than I did in Bledla, which was reversed from book 1.
Yeah.
No, I had a similar experience. I think in the 2 books that I've read so far, there's a lot of characters that are strictly good or strictly bad, and they have kind of their internal conflicts, but it's not so much wrestling with this grayness. And I really liked in book 1 that the priests displayed a lot of different levels of that zealotry and how that manifested in them and their different levels of doubting. And that focus wasn't nearly as strong in book 2. And with Bledla furthering down that zealot path, which I think is realistic for his character, but it wasn't counterbalanced as much in book 2, which made, I think, with these books feeling a little bit more, and you can disagree with me, Philip, you can respond to this, but these books feel a little bit more like we have the good guys and we have the bad guys. And with pulling back some of the priest perspectives and leaning into Bledla, who's leaning further evil, that kind of even further distinguishes that line. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, of course, Bledla dies.
Right.
So you can't go any further anymore. And you get a hint of who's taking over at the end of the 2nd book. Who's the new supreme priest?
Euramon, yeah.
Euramon. Yeah. And so he is going to have a much bigger role. Hopefully, you will find that nuance in his arc.
Cool. I look forward to it.
We'll see. Yeah.
I was wanting, honestly, more Euramon in this book, because that was something that I appreciated in book 1, especially because we got some of more nuance about like his mother's death and his grief in book 1. And so I liked those layers in book 1. But yeah, I am excited to get more Yuramon in book 3.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think one thing I did like about Bloodla's dynamic was harkening back to what we talked about at the beginning of the video is Dayraven is struggling with this. How much of myself do I forsake for the good of the people? And that kind of direct parallel with Bloodla, who is like, how much can I sacrifice of everyone else for my own gain? It was a good kind of, showing two very different sides of that struggle of desire for power and self-promotion versus needing to release yourself for the people.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like Bledla is not, he would not think of himself as being selfish. He would think of himself as almost sacrificial. See,
Sure.
I'm doing all these horrible things, but I'm doing them to bring about the kingdom of the eternal, and nothing else
Right.
is that. So he's willing to experience death. He's willing to inflict all kinds of horrible suffering in order to bring about the salvation that he thinks is around the corner. If everyone else would just get on board, so yeah, he certainly becomes very single-minded in that. I would agree with that. But I think that's the only place I could have brought him in a way.
Unless, well, it was clear that you were definitely going for that with Irkenwald, with King Irkenwald, right? He's 100% the person wanting the power.
He's a narcissist.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't care about the religion. He cares about the power.
Yeah. He only cares about himself. There's nothing else. Yeah, Irkenwald is a narcissist. He's has no interest really in any. He's charismatic. He knows how to talk the talk. And I think we've seen plenty of people in history like that who are willing to exploit people's beliefs in order to promote themselves, essentially. Yeah. So
I couldn't believe he killed his wife, though. Goodness.
Ooh, yeah.
So sad. I felt so sad for her.
I do too. That's a horrible scene. I had a hard time writing that even. But he goes somewhere. That's his moment, I think, of going down a path that is considerably darker. Because he had moments in the first book where he was funny. And he in his interactions with Bledla, sometimes I was on Irkenwald's side, and in that moment when in the first book Bledla makes the guy's head explode, Irkenwald says, "Well, I guess you got it all out of him," So he had his moments, but yeah, that is when he chokes Moda to death, and his response to that too, I think, is very revealing, I hope, in terms of what's going on in his head, because
I kept expecting him to kind of like snap out of it, like, oh my goodness, I just did that, and it seemed like no, he was fine with what he did.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, he's in serious denial though about what he is, and I mean, he does kind of turn around to say, "Oh, how do I look, honey?" And then he realizes, "Oh wait, I killed you."
Oh yeah, goodness. That is true narcissism there.
Yeah.
What would you say? I know that we're currently reading To Your Eternity, and you've mentioned that there are some parallels that you can see there as well with how the elf shard works. What would you say would be your main inspirations or like jumping points that made you continue in the direction that you ended up, or like the spark that made you say, "Oh, you know what? I think I know where I want to go."
Wow, that's actually hard in some cases to pinpoint. I think the way I work anyway is I think through the whole story, and then there are moments like I mentioned, the idea of Vikings carrying their ship over a narrow spit of land or something like that, and I think, oh, I could do that, but I could make it cooler. I could use magic and make them, have a big wave carry them over that isthmus there in that scene or something like that. So there are definitely moments like that, but then there are things that just you go with your guts, you go with your instinct and you think, what's compelling here? I think I got an idea of the themes I wanted to wrestle with from medieval literature, from things like Beowulf, from and certainly from fantasy authors inspired by medieval literature as well. But also a lot of it comes from my life. I have thought a lot about religion, for example. I grew up going to church every Sunday, and I've mentioned before that my father is a pastor, my grandfather, and I have a great-grandfather who was a pastor as well. So that's generations and generations of religion in my family. And I grew up with a very strongly religious mindset. And I consider myself a spiritual person still. I consider myself a seeker, and I probably will never stop exploring how do I feel about this? How do I, because religion is something that, again, this is humanity's dual nature. We have seen people who have used religion to promote love and to promote community building and to promote all kinds of good things in the world. And on the other hand, we've seen people using religion and you can't always just blame the religion for that, but we've seen plenty of atrocities committed in the name of God, and people convinced that what they're doing is right, like Budla. So there are people like that who have that single-minded zealotry. So yeah, I just wanted, I'll probably continue exploring these things to try to figure them out. So that's those ideas, those explorations were certainly things that guided my writing and where I ultimately went. Particularly, I think you'll find in the third book as well, because I'm not done in this book really reflecting here. I'm just getting started.
I want to say too that I really enjoyed the different settings that you explored. And one thing I was taking note of is I don't know if it was I imagine it was a conscious decision, but I was really impressed with the way, like with certain kingdoms, how the descriptions of the palaces or the kingdoms themselves seem to be in parallel to the sentiments of the people. Like, for example, in Sildarin, the Sildarin king, he refuses an alliance, for example. He's very closed off and he claims pride. He underestimates the barbarian tribes. He's very severe, and the way that his throne room is described, it's like this hard gray marble with lots of jewels and very ornamented. And I don't know, there was something about the way you would describe certain kingdoms and certain descriptions that I was wondering if you were doing that consciously.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I think you can capture a culture in a way through, one thing is through language, through names, and I've done enough with language in here to hopefully convince people that these cultures have their own unique languages and that language is a thing there, and that certain people don't understand other people, and there's a language barrier in some scenes and that sort of thing. So language is important, but also, yeah, if you look at the dwellings of the folk of the tribes, when Yoramon visits in the company of Munzil, and he has to put up with Skuld all that time as well, and that's not the happiest of times for Yoramon there, but the simple hide tents and the muddy villages that he sees, in contrast with what he considers to be, the good life, which is a civilized city, with all.
Oh, yeah. And I wrote down another note about that specifically, that from Yoramon's perspective, that those tribes, that they didn't understand the gift, and that, from his perspective, and that they didn't understand. And I don't know why I wrote this. I wrote down letters. I need to understand my own notes sometimes because I don't remember why I wrote that. But I did think the gift part was interesting, and you could let me know what I meant by letters if you remember what I'm talking about. Because the interesting thing about the gift is it seems to be non-discriminatory as far as who has the gift. So there could be people among the tribes who have the gift.
Yep.
But maybe it's just they're not aware of it, or maybe it's going to be
so the
differently.
are ignorant of the gift. They didn't know about it. The people who become the Torlenders and the Elenders and the Markmen, they were from the Ilarkai originally themselves, and they didn't know about the gift. They learned it from the Andumaic people. And so one of the ironies here is how the Torlenders think of themselves as the pinnacle of civilization, but really they're, as Gnorn puts it, they're the relatives of savages, right? They came from these people that they disdain And yes, and Yormon is right. They don't know how to write. That's what the letters part is.
Oh, okay.
They don't
Gosh,
have
I'm sorry.
reading and writing, and they don't know about the gift. And to him, these are marks of being completely uncivilized. And he recognizes the gift in one of the thralls. He sees that this guy, if he had been a Torlander, would have been a priest.
Okay. Yeah. And then, sorry, just one more thing about the settings too. I just also really quickly wanted to mention how much I enjoyed the hidden city as well, and
Yes.
how you described the pony horses there,
Uh-huh.
and that king was different. He seemed
Wirt's
a lot more.
grievance.
Uh-oh.
No,
What?
Wirt's, Jenny Wirt's grievance.
Jenny
of the
Wirt's?
horses.
Did she have a grievance about those ones?
She might have been okay with those.
Oh, okay.
Annie, you'll have to let me know. But yeah, there was the king there. He seemed to be much more flexible. He gives Dayraven a couple of his people, rangers there, to go up Mount Wormberg. I love that name, by the way, Wormberg. It's like perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really loved the way you described the walls around the city and the palaces kind of built up along the mountain there. Oh yeah, you also brought up Celtic, what I thought might have been Celtic knots, intricate knots, but I wasn't sure if that was borrowed from Celtic
In the sculpture.
influence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, they reflect their environment, like many people. So they are the best sculptors in Jormungand, or Andumadan, as they would call it. And they're survivors from a past conflict with Seldaran. There's a history there. They were driven into this place, and the hidden city has basically been instrumental in their survival because they had to hide from their more powerful adversary all this time. They're the underdog in this continuous conflict against Sildaran, and that's why they choose not to participate when Galdor tries to persuade them to fight the Torlanders. They say, well, we don't care what happens to the Sildaran, and that's been the problem from the beginning, is nobody wants to come help because it's somebody else's problem, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And that's poor Sequara's problem, is she keeps trying so hard to get these different people to unite.
Yep.
Yeah. And then the Mark gets involved as well, but they seem like they're getting involved in the wrong side. Torlanders.
Because they're basically kin of the Torlanders. And they have this long-standing agreement that they will help each other in times of need. And that is something that Erkenwald and Bloodlet exploit.
Sorry, Merphy and Jimmy?
I'm looking over my notes. I'm trying to see if there's anything we haven't discussed yet that I wanted to dig into. So Jimmy, you go ahead.
No, I think I've said my piece. I've said what I did love the hidden city. I'm a big fan of hidden cities. It's something that Tad Williams has done before, and it's like one of my favorite things that fantasy can do. Like if you have any sort of like masked or hidden city, I'm gonna like it most likely.
You know what it reminds me of? It kind of reminds me a little bit of Super Mario Brothers 3, the original one.
I did not expect you to say that.
Well, like you just go off. I don't know. Like there's a city in the clouds or the city over here. I don't know. It's just something very fantasy about that game.
Yeah.
I love that game. Very old school. Sorry. Did you have a Nintendo, Philip?
I did. I had an Atari. That's how old I am.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
God damn it.
We had an Atari too in my household.
So Bloodla, was he being influenced by controlling the dragons? Like, did that influence his mindset?
Oh, I'm glad you caught that. Yes.
Okay, so yes?
Yes, he was. This is something that Dayraven realizes near the end. He realizes because he's been melded to a dragon for a much shorter period. What Dayraven realizes that initially perhaps Bloodla was not as bloodthirsty, but this long connection to the dragons has made him more and more and more willing to indulge in violence as the way to achieve his goals. So this is something that Dayraven realizes when Bloodla is killed. Dayraven's reaction is kind of, he sees it as weirdly as a kind of tragedy, a loss of what could have been. But he recognizes that, what you just mentioned.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
a really good catch. That's a good catch on your part. Yeah.
So that has me asking questions. One, is Dayraven going to be affected by his short bond with the dragon. 2, what does this mean for Joramun as our next leader, as well as how the king is going to offer his support or not now that he's in this position of power? I have a lot of questions surrounding what this fallout is going to be.
Yeah, Dayraven's biggest problem by far is going to be the elf. That is pretty much going to consume everything.
Yes.
The third book. That is the driving factor of the third book, in many respects. So this is Johanna's book, the third book for sure.
Yay, so excited.
But yeah, the dragons he did set free. I will say that even if I don't revisit the dragons here, I actually have the standalone sequel thing that I've written. And I might just be going back to them in that, which is
okay.
already written, actually. It's called While Darkness Gathers. So
fewer dragons in the final book, but we have more to look forward to in the standalone.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Okay.
More dragon exploration.
I don't know how I feel about fewer dragons in the final book.
Yeah, well, there's enough going on with the elf that I felt like, this is the main concern here.
I would like to air one more personal grievance, please.
Okay. Uh-oh.
It's okay. It's just another nitpick that I feel like yelling at you about.
There's evidence on your phone, I thought, for a second.
Oh, there is. I have quotes. So there's this thing, Philip. I've talked to you about it before. Fingered. Why do so many authors?
I heard you talk about fingering the other
Why
day.
do so many authors use the word that way? I feel like we should stop doing this.
Film in the sixth grade locker room. What is going on?
Here we go. A slight cool breeze with a scent of sea caressed Dayraven's skin and fingered his robe. Okay, first of all, why'd you gotta phrase it like that? Second of all, how does a breeze finger a robe? Here we go. Dayraven looked around the garden as a breeze fingered a loose strand of his hair and wafted the flower's sweet fragrance past him. Why you gotta phrase it like that? And also, a breeze can't finger your hair. Gorn noticed a change in the air, which grew thicker and moister. Gotta use that word too. With a tangier whiff of salt, even as a breeze began fingering his face. Why you gotta phrase it like that? And also, a breeze can't finger your face.
Fingered in the same sentence?
Wow. You sure do. And one more. This is a bonus. It's not even the same. You just have a thing for fingers. He brought his face closer and splashed it. Then he cupped his hands and raised the water to his cracked lips. When he swallowed, the cold fingers slithered down his throat. Why is water being fingers slithering down a throat? What is you and fingers?
I don't know. I think I could turn the question around and ask you what is it with fingers? But
what is it? It's the same thing as the undulating thing. Why do authors use that turn of phrase so often in fantasy?
We love it.
Oh, you do.
But at least I don't have a sentence where I use fingering and undulating, but maybe I could work that into the sequel for you.
Stop.
My God.
Yeah.
Jimmy, go.
Please move on.
I got nothing. Say one thing for Dayraven. Say he loves the finger. That's Hey, you wrote it, Philip. Don't look at me like that. I don't know what you're looking at me like.
I think that was a half Abercrombie quote there, Jimmy.
It was.
I heard some Abercrombie in that one. Yeah.
Oh no.
My God.
So.
Well,
I feel like
I left Johanna speechless.
I feel like I'm off the hook now, at least. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Philip, whenever Urgewald turns around after he's just been basically threatened with death from nuclear dragon, and he goes, "You'll pay for this." Why didn't they just kill him right there and be like, "You didn't learn your lesson," and just kill him?
Well, because it was a parley. You don't kill people during a parley.
Well, what was the threat then? Right? Like they brought him there to threaten and be like, "Hey, we need to end this war,"
Right.
and he's like, "Fine." And then it's always like, but I'll get you back. And it's like, we
Yeah.
didn't accomplish anything
But
there.
those are the rules, right? Like you have
Yeah,
to be
but
familiar
if he
with
had not
medieval
accepted,
society here, where
but
you,
if he
yeah,
had not accepted the peace terms and he had walked away, they nuke him. He accepted
yeah.
the peace terms and it's like, I'm gonna go away for now, but I'll be back. And I'm just like, well, then let's just snuff him out right here. Like I just don't.
But that's not honorable, Jimmy.
Jimmy has the iron fist.
I don't know. I just thought it
I
was
mean,
so.
aren't you? You're one of the good guys, aren't you?
I'll be back. Like
No.
I don't know.
The good guys are bound by these terms to honor them, and maybe even Erkenwald would have.
I guess
honored
what I'm saying is Erkenwald's not really agreeing to peace. Then is he? Like
No, he's agreeing to leave this particular battle, but he'll have other things to do, as I talk about in the after parts. He's got this territories he considered to be his that are actually in open rebellion. So,
But isn't it also just a really stupid move for him to be like, and by the way, I'm going to be up.
Yeah.
well, as he has not exactly exhibited the greatest intelligence heretofore either.
That's fair. I mean,
Yeah.
he killed his wife.
Yeah.
I did have a question, and I don't know if it was me just like missing it and just overlooking something, but I did write down. So there was a scene towards the end where Sequara is in a predicament with there are flames, something's on fire, and then there's a little girl, and she's forced to choose between the flames and the little girl, and then she's interrupted by King Naitaran.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious, whatever happened? Did the problem get resolved, like with the little girl?
Well, she saved the little girl from a mob of people who were about to kill her because she was an Illarkai slave. She wasn't able to escape when all the other Illarkai escaped. She was a little girl. She was left behind. So this mob, they're understandably peeved at the Illarkai at the moment because they're threatening to kill everyone in the city, and they're taking out their fear and their anger on this little girl because she's right there, you know. Mm-hmm. And so Sequara obviously is not going to allow that to happen. So she intervenes, saves the little girl from the mob, and is trying to help her. Of course, the little girl just sees another person who's different from her, who potentially could hurt her. She's terrified. All she can think to do is run away. And at that moment, Sequara is interrupted and then realizes a moment later it's too late. The little girl has disappeared, you know, down an alley. So we don't know what happens to that little girl, except that Sequara did save her in that moment.
That was what I was wondering. I was like, what happened to the little girl? But I'm glad that she got saved. And the other question,
at least in that on that occasion,
yeah, that's great. The other question I had too, and is that Dayraven, something about how he was brought here to Wormberg, like that the elf told him to, that the elf brought him there.
Oh, so in his vision, when he has the whole moment under the oak tree and all of that, the end of his vision, he's coming back to Jormungand and he sees this mountain and realizes,
oh yes, I do remember
where
that.
I need to go. Yeah.
Ah, okay, got it.
I don't know if it's kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment, but earlier in Astrolad, when Sequara was teaching him Andumaic and how to read and everything, that script, they're reading a scroll that describes Gorsarhad.
I do remember that. I even wrote that down, and I even thought, is that the dragon that Munziel is talking about in his dream? And is that going to come up later? I did kind of wonder if that was foreshadowing.
So somewhere in the recesses of his mind, you could argue there's awareness of this mountain where this dragon, this supposedly this legendary dragon, the eldest of all dragons, resides. And, you know, who knows? I can't really tell you how mystical visions work.
No, I
can tell you that they wouldn't be mystical anymore. But somehow in that vision, he feels he gets the message, this is what you need to do. You need to get your own dragon so that you have a bond with a dragon, and that'll make it easier for you in the moment to take away Bloodlet's bond from the dragons that he's controlling. Because Bloodlet has this advantage over you. He's had these black dragons under his control for a long time.
Jimmy and Merphy, anything else?
I'm pretty sure I've had all my rantings.
No, I don't think I have anything else. Loved Orvindil, however you say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do wonder where it's going to go. Like when the book ends, I'm like, well, this is a interesting place to leave off of and have another book that's bigger than the second one.
Yeah.
Yeah. By
That's pretty big.
21,000 words more. Yeah.
You son of a gun.
Gonna be your favorite, Jimmy. It's
3 books in 9 months.
But yeah, I think we've hit a lot of the major points.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I guess the only thing I would just add once again is I really enjoyed the Buddhist non-dualist elements. I feel like in some ways I feel like I'm not quite the most educated reader to read your trilogy, Philip, because I don't know the influences as much as other readers who I hear like, oh yes, I get that this influences this and the Celtic and the Welsh and the Old Norse and Beowulf and this, and I'm like, I've read Beowulf and I read one saga. I can't remember what sagas I read now.
Okay.
You recommended them to me, and I can't remember now. Die Nibelung, the
Nibelungenlied or the Volsung Saga. You read the Volsung
Volsung Saga. I read Volsung Saga.
Yeah.
Yes. So I read that.
Yeah.
That was the one I read. So I just don't feel like I'm as educated to read your trilogy as some other people, but I did really latch on to the non-dual mystical stuff, even though I'm not an expert on that topic either, but I have had some experiences and I just felt like you really described them beautifully. And I really loved the way that they tied into like some of the, how we have, like you said, the religious zealotry, the things that are going on with the war, the geopolitical issues, but then you also have this magic that is inspired by Buddhism. And I really like that about the magic. One thing I really appreciate is even though it's a softer magic, which I usually prefer soft magic, I also appreciated that, like thinking about attribution theory, which I always talk about whenever I read Abercrombie, actually. But you see how there is an element of ability that plays a role in the magic. There's a quality of effort, putting so much effort into wielding your ability. But there's also an element of luck, and there's also an element of task difficulty. So I like seeing how those 4 things are balanced with the magic. It's not all luck, and it's not all ability. Yeah. There are definitely levels.
Yeah, that all comes together, including the Volsung Saga moment in this book when Dayraven has the whole conversation with Gorsarhad. And I don't know if you thought of the conversation between Fafnir and Sigurd from the Volsung Saga, but it is definitely a kind of an echo of that that I had in there. So
yeah. Well, there were times when I was reading it that I was like, this feels very saga-like. And it's more, I'm not an expert. It's just more like a feeling thing, that I could pick up on.
You have good instincts. Yeah.
And it was more instinctual, unfortunately, and not so much an expert thing. But I really did appreciate that.
And if you're not an expert, I'm a plebe.
Yeah. Oh. I was going to say, I know literally nothing.
I got to get you guys reading sagas. That's what I got to do. Right?
I know. Well, you did. You got me to read those ones.
Vinland Saga.
So.
Yeah, you got me to read the Vinland Sagas as well. No, Jimmy, not the manga.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the manga.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've read that too. No. Well, Philip got me to read the Vinland Sagas because I got him to read Vinland Saga.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I asked Philip to read Vinland Saga, but he did with you instead. And that's how
I read it because of you, though, Jimmy.
That's Merphy's.
That helps. I read Vinland Saga because of Jimmy a long time ago.
It's because I yell more.
Philip said he didn't have time and it was childish.
What?
I may have just lied. He didn't. He might not.
We'll never know.
That was so funny.
That is my new campaign.
Poor Jimmy.
Prophet of EDAN.
Prophet of EDAN.
Here we go.
I have a wrench. I
don't know. book about war and Buddhism.
Yeah.
Boom. Tagline.
And some cool
fingers. A whole lot of fingers.
Well, thank you 3 for reading this thing and for talking to me about it and being nice most of the time.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah. This was really fun for me. Even without Alan, I missed Alan. We didn't get any, Pinocchio Dayraven voice or any Arnold Schwarzenegger Sequara voice.
I'm pretty sure there was some throat yodeling last time. Disappointed that that's not here.
Yes.
Is that what it was called?
It was Tibetan monks singing.
That's right. Yeah. It was throat
Oh,
singing.
Throat singing. That's what
The
it's
throat
called.
So,
Yeah.
is there any update on the audiobook?
Well, I am still hoping that it will be the first one that could be out in the fall, but I don't have a firm date or anything like that. I feel like Alan is close. Like he just needs to take this leap and then go. And I think he's ready. He's like on the precipice. So I think he knows what he's doing. He just needs to do it. And he's going to be brilliant and awesome, I know. So it'll be worth the wait. But yeah, I'm hoping before the end of fall for The Way of EDAN, at least. And I think once he gets that under his belt, the other two will happen pretty rapidly. That's going to be fun. That's going to be a blast to hear what he does with that, I think.
I'm
Yeah,
very
it'll
excited.
be an experience.
Yay. Well, fantastic. Well, I want to thank you so much, all three of you. Merphy, thank you so much for joining us for this. Jimmy, thank you so much. And Philip, it was such a pleasure.
Oh, yeah.
And just happy to celebrate you, and congratulations on your trilogy.
Yeah, congrats, man.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.